I just want to start by saying if you want an answer at the end, prepare to be disappointed. There just isn't one. I was an intern at Nickelodeon Studios for a year, not 5 for my degree in animation. It wasn't paid, of course. Most internships aren't, but I did have some perks beyond education. To adults, it might not seem like a big one. Most kids at the time would go crazy over it. Now, since I've worked directly with the editors and animators, I got to be the new episodes days before they aired. I'll get right to it without giving too many unnecessary details. They had very recently made a SpongeBob movie, and the entire staff was somewhat sapped of creativity, so it took them longer to start out this season. But the delay lasted longer for more upsetting reasons. There was a problem with the series 4 premiere that set everyone and everything back for several months. Me and whoever interns were in the editing room along with the lead animators and sound editors for a final cut. We received a copy that was supposed to be Fear of a Curry Patty and gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that it isn't final yet, animators often put up a mock title card. Sort of an inside joke for us. With phony, oftentimes lewd titles, such as How Sex Doesn't Work instead of Rockabye Bivolve. When SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a sea scallop, nothing particular funny but work-related chuckles. So when we saw the title card Squidward Suicide, we didn't think it was more than a morbid joke. One editor did a small throat laugh at it. The happy-go-lucky music plays as normal. The story begins with Squidward playing his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes like normal. We hear SpongeBob laughing outside, and Squidward stops, yelling at him to keep it down, as he has a concert that night and needs to practice. SpongeBob says okay, and goes to see Sandy with Patrick. The bubble splash screen comes up and we see the ending of Squidward's concert. This is when things begin to seem off. While playing, a few frames repeat themselves, but the sound doesn't, at this point, sound assists up of animation, so yes, that's not common. But when he stops playing, the sound finishes as if the skit never happened. There's slight murmuring in the crowd before they begin to boo him. Not normal cartoon booing that is common in the show, but you could very clearly hear malice in it. Or malice is how that's pronounced. Squidward's in full frame and looks visibly afraid. The shot goes to the crowd, with SpongeBob in center frame, and he too is booing, very much unlike him. That isn't the oddest thing, though. What is odd is everyone had hyper-realistic eyes, very detailed, clearly not shots of real people's eyes, but something a bit more real than CGI. People were red. Some of us looked at each other, obviously confused. But since we weren't with the writers, we didn't question its appeal to children yet. The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very forlorn. The view out of this porthole window is of a night sky, so it isn't very going up to the concert. The unsettling point is there is no sound, literally no sound. Not even the feedback from the speakers in the room. It's as if the speakers were turned off. Their status, hey, showed them working perfectly. He just sat there blinking in this silence for about 30 seconds. Then he started to sob softly. He put his hands, aka tentacles, over his eyes, cried quietly for a full minute more. All the while, a sound in the background very slowly growing from nothing to barely audible. It sounded like a slight breeze through a forest. The screen slowly began to zoom in on his face. By slow, I mean it's only noticeable if you look at shots 10 seconds apart side by side. His sobbing gets louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitches a bit as it twists in on itself for a split second, then back to normal. The wind for the trees sound gets slowly louder and more severe as if a storm is brewing somewhere. The eerie part of this sound and Squidward's sobbing sounded real. As if the sound wasn't coming from the speakers, as if the speakers were holes, the sound was coming from the other side. As good as it sounds as a studio likes to have, they don't purchase the equipment to be that good to produce sound of that quality. Below that sound of this wind and sobbing, very faint, something sounded like laughing. It came in at odd intervals and never lasted more than a second, so you had a hard time pinning it. We watched this show twice, so part of me thinks sound too specific for you. Specific. But I've had time to think about them. At the first seconds of this, the screen blurred and twitched violently, and something flashed over the screen as if a single frame was replaced. The lead animation editor paused and rewound frame by frame. All we saw was horrible. It was a still photo of a dead child. He could have been more than 6. The face was mangled and bloody. One eye, dangling over his upturned face, popped. He was naked out of his underwear, his stomach crudely cut open, and his entrails laying beside him. He was laying on some pavement that was probably a road. The most upsetting part that there was a shadow of the photographer. There was no crime tape, no evidence, tags, or markers. And the angle was completely off for a shot designed to be evidence. It would seem the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were, of course, mortified, but pressed on, hoping that it was just a sick joke. The screen put this back to Squidward, still sobbing, louder than before, half body and frame. There was now what appeared to be blood running down from his face. The blood was also done in a hyper-realistic style, looking as if you touched you get blood on your fingers. The wind sound now were that of a gale blowing through a forest. There were even snapping sounds of branches, the laughing, a deep baritone, lasting at longer intervals and coming more frequently. After about 20 seconds, the screen again twisted and showed a single frame photo. The editor was reluctant to go back. We all were, but he knew he had to. This time, the photo was what appeared to be a little girl, no older than the first child. She was leaning on her stomach. I'm not going to say this because it's really inappropriate. Her entrails were piled on top of her, another crew cut along her back. Again, the body was on the street, and the photographer's shadow was visible, very similar in size and shape to the first. I choked back, vomit, and one entered. The only female in the room ran out. The show resumed. After about 5 seconds after the second photo played, Squidward went silent, as did all sound, like it was when this scene started. He put his tentacles down, and his eyes were now done hyper-realism, like the others were in the beginning of this episode. They were bleeding, bloodshot, and pulsating. He just stared at the screen as if he was watching the viewer. After about 10 seconds, he started sobbing, this time not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud, and most fear-inducing of all of his sobbing was mixed with screams. Tears and blood were dripping down from his face at a heavy rate. The wind sound came back, and so did the deep voice laughing. And this time, the still photo lasted for a good 5 frames. The animator was able to stop it on the 4th and backed up. This time the photo was of a boy of the same age. But this time the scene was different. The entrails were just being pulled out from his stomach, wound by a large hand. The right eye popped and dangling, the blood trickling down from it. The animator proceeded. It was hard to believe, but the next one was different, but we couldn't tell what. He went on to the next same thing. He went back to the first and played them quicker, and I lost it. I vomited on the floor. The animator and sound editors gasping at the screen. The 5 frames were not as if they were 5 different photos. They were played out as if they were frames from the video. We saw the hand slowly lift out the guts. We saw the kid's eyes focus on it. We even saw 2 frames. What did I say? So the 2 frames. The kid began to blink. The lead sound editor told us to stop. He had to call on the creator to see this. Mr. Hellenberg arrived within about 15 minutes. He was confused as to why he was called down there. Slater just continued the episode. Once a few frames were shown, all screaming, all sound again stopped. Screamer was just staring at the viewer, full frame of the face. About 3 seconds, the shot quickly panned out, and that deep voice said, "Do it." And we see in Squidward's hands a shotgun. He immediately puts the gun in his mouth and pulls